My name is Naomi Fletcher, and before anyone knew me as the woman who inherited a $400 million estate, I was known as the girl who smelled like trash. It still feels strange to say those words out loud. Even now, as I sit in the quiet of my uncle's old library, surrounded by polished wooden shelves and soft lamps, I can still remember the scent of garbage bags clinging to my uniform. I can still feel the early morning cold biting at my fingers as I lifted bins in the dark. I never expected my life to become a story people would want to hear, but here I am, telling it myself, in my own voice, because no one else lived it but me. I grew up in a small American town called Williford, Virginia, a place where everyone knew each other's business and pretended they didn't. The streets were lined with tall oak trees, and the houses looked almost identical. Old wooden structures with chipped paint and front porches that creaked every time someone stepped on them. My family home was no different. It had peeling white paint on the outside and a roof that leaked in 5 different spots when it rained. My parents, Linda and Mark Fletcher, always said they wanted to fix it, but somehow the money never came. Or maybe they never cared enough to actually try. Inside that house, I never felt like I belonged. Everything I did seemed wrong to them. If I spoke too softly, my father said I was weak. If I spoke too loudly, my mother said I was rude. And when I turned 24 and took a job as a garbage collector, the only job I could get at the time, they acted as if I had personally dragged the family name through the mud. My mother would wrinkle her nose the moment I stepped through the door, and my father would look at my uniform as though it were made of mold instead of fabric. "You embarrass us," my mother said one night as I pulled off my heavy boots by the front door. She was sitting at the kitchen table, arms crossed, staring at me like I was a stranger. "You could at least try to work somewhere people actually respect," my father added. "A store, maybe, or a cafe. Anything but trash." But work was work, and I was proud of it, even if they weren't. Someone had to clean the streets. Someone had to pick up what people threw away. And that someone was me. Every morning before the sun rose, I drove to Riverside Hill, the nearby city where our waste company operated. The air was cold at that hour, usually dark, sometimes misty. I would tie my dark hair into a bun, slip on thick gloves, and climb into the big green truck with my coworker, Ethan Ross. Ethan was one of those quiet, tired men who always offered a small smile, even when life was rough. His blue eyes looked like they carried more stories than he ever told. "Ready for another day, Naomi?" he would ask as the engine rumbled beneath us. "As ready as I'll ever be," I always said back. Together we lifted bins, dragged broken furniture, and hauled bags that smelled like spoiled food and damp newspapers. My hands became rough. My shoulders grew stronger. My clothes always carried a faint scent of trash, no matter how long I showered. But I didn't mind any of it. Hard work never scared me. What scared me was how easily people judged someone based on what they did rather than who they were. The only person who never judged me was my uncle, my mother's older brother, Raymond Hale. Uncle Raymond lived far from Williford, in a place called Maple Harbor, another American city that felt like a world of its own. His house sat high on a hill beyond a tall black iron gate. When I was a little girl, I used to press my face against the car window whenever we drove past it. The lawns were bright green even in winter, and a long stone path led up to the front door like something from an old movie. Warm lights glowed from the windows in the evenings, making the whole place look alive, almost magical. My parents rarely visited him. They said he was odd, private, and hard to talk to. But I always felt the opposite. When I turned 18, he started inviting me over for tea every few months. He would sit by the window in a simple gray sweater, never a suit, even though he could afford 100 of them, and he talked to me about life in a way no one else ever did. "I like that you're not afraid to work, Naomi," he told me once, pouring tea into delicate cups that looked like they came from Europe. "This country may be full of rich people, but it's built by hands that get dirty." I remember his smile that day, soft, warm, proud. I didn't know then how important those words would become. People in Williford whispered that his house was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Some even said he had accounts in Europe with money in pounds. But I never asked him about any of that. I didn't care about his money. I just liked sitting with him, listening to his stories, and knowing someone truly saw me, not as a disappointment, not as trash, but as a person. He had silver hair, gentle brown eyes, and a way of speaking that made even silence feel comfortable. He wasn't married, and he had no children. He lived alone with a small staff who respected him but kept their distance. When I walked through his front halls, I always felt calm, like I had stepped into a place where time moved more slowly. But the strange thing was, I never imagined that one day, every inch of that house, from the carved banisters to the long echoing halls, would belong to me. Back then, I still thought my future would be simple. Wake up before dawn. Work. Sleep. Repeat. The same life every day. I used to watch the sunrise from the back of the truck, my gloves stained with old coffee grounds and rotten fruit, and wonder if this was all my life would ever become. But life changes in ways you cannot predict. It sneaks up behind you and whispers, "Not yet. There is more." I didn't know it then, but my uncle was already sick. I didn't know that his quiet smile hid a truth he never spoke about. I didn't know that soon, a phone call would turn my entire world upside down. But that is another chapter. All I knew in those days was this. I was Naomi Fletcher. I was a garbage collector, and I had no idea that the world I knew was about to shatter and rebuild itself around me. The day my life changed forever began like any other workday, cold, loud, and smelling like old trash. I remember waking up before sunrise in my tiny rented room in Lakeview Heights, Virginia, the moon still hanging over the trees outside. My alarm buzzed at 4:30, and I groaned as I sat up, every muscle in my shoulders aching from the previous day. I pulled on my heavy boots, zipped up my uniform jacket, and tied my hair back into the same tight bun I wore every day. At that point, I believed my future was simple. Collect garbage, try to save some dollars, and pray my parents would eventually forgive me for not being the daughter they imagined. I walked to the bus stop with my breath turning white in the morning air. The sky was still dark, and the streets were silent except for a few passing trucks. The bus took me to Riverside Hill, where the waste company lot stood behind a tall chain-link fence. The trucks were already warming up, their engines rumbling like tired giants. I climbed into truck 14, where Ethan Ross sat in the driver's seat, sipping a steaming cup of cheap coffee. "Morning," he said, offering me a weak smile. "Morning," I replied, rubbing my arms for warmth. The smell of gasoline mixed with the scent of yesterday's trash as we pulled out of the lot. The city was waking up slowly, streetlights flickering off, bakery lights switching on, a few joggers running along the sidewalks. We made our usual rounds through Harborline Street, Graham Avenue, and the quiet neighborhoods near the Old River Bridge. The bags were heavier that day for some reason, maybe because I was more tired than usual. Maybe because I felt something hanging in the air, something I couldn't name. My phone buzzed around 7 in the morning, but we were lifting bins, so I ignored it. It buzzed again at 7:30, then again at 8. I almost never got calls, especially not 3 in a row. On our break, I finally pulled off my glove and checked the screen. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 1 text message. "This is Daniel Moore, attorney for Mr. Raymond Hale. Please call me. It's urgent." My heart stopped. The phone felt heavy in my hand. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. I knew only one person named Raymond Hale, my uncle. My kind, quiet uncle who always smiled at me like I mattered. My uncle who lived in that beautiful stone house in Maple Harbor. My uncle who drank tea with me and told me to be proud of honest work. Something inside me twisted. "I need to make a call," I said to Ethan, my voice barely louder than a whisper. He nodded, a frown forming on his face. "Go ahead. I'll wait." I stepped behind the truck, where it was quiet, and dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice, then connected. "Hello," I said, my voice shaking. "Miss Fletcher?" a calm male voice asked. "Yes, this is she. This is Daniel Moore, attorney for Mr. Raymond Hale. I'm afraid I have some difficult news." The world around me suddenly felt far away. The noise of traffic, the smell of the river, even the cold breeze on my neck disappeared. "What happened?" I whispered. I'm very sorry to inform you that your uncle, Mr. Hale, passed away last night. Everything inside me dropped. I grabbed the side of the truck for balance. My knees felt weak, and my breath caught in my throat. I hadn't even known he was sick. I hadn't visited him for 3 months because I was too embarrassed about my life falling apart. I didn't know, I whispered. No one knew, the lawyer replied gently. He requested privacy. He spoke highly of you. He cared about you deeply. Tears stung my eyes, and I turned away so Ethan wouldn't see. My uncle was the one person who believed in me. He was the one who told me my work mattered. And now he was gone. There's another reason I called, Daniel continued after a moment of silence. Your uncle left a will. I need you to come to my office in Brookside City, Maryland. He mentioned you by name. It's important. My heart beat faster. Why me? Why would he mention me in something so serious? He had a big house, lots of land, and, from what people said, a fortune. I had never expected any of it to be connected to me. I can come later today, I said softly. Good, I'll be here. When I hung up, I wiped my cheeks and walked back to the truck. You okay? Ethan asked quietly. I forced a nod, but he saw the truth in my eyes. Still, he didn't push. We finished our route in silence. After my shift ended, I took a bus straight to Brookside City. The ride took almost 2 hours. I stared out the window the whole time, watching the blur of American highways, the passing farms, the small towns with faded signs. My stomach twisted with fear and confusion. I wished my uncle were still alive, sitting by his window with his warm smile, telling me everything would be okay. Brookside City was bigger than I expected. Tall glass buildings, busy streets, polished sidewalks. I found the address easily. A sleek office tower with silver windows reflecting the afternoon sun. Inside, the air smelled like expensive coffee, leather, and printer ink. I felt out of place in my work jacket and worn-out boots. The 10th floor was quiet. Frosted glass doors displayed the name Moore and Bennett Legal Group. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. Daniel Moore rose from behind his desk as soon as he saw me. He was tall, with dark blonde hair and a gray suit that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. His assistant, Clara Bennett, sat at a smaller desk with a folder open in front of her. Miss Fletcher, Daniel said gently, shaking my hand. Thank you for coming. We sat down. He asked a few questions, how often I saw my uncle, how close we were. I told him everything I could through the tightness in my throat. Then he opened the folder. Miss Fletcher, he said slowly, your uncle named you as his sole heir. I blinked. I don't understand. What does that mean? It means, he said, choosing his words carefully, that everything he owned, including the house, all properties, accounts, and investments, is now yours. I stared at him like he was speaking another language. But my mother, his siblings, my cousins. He was clear, Daniel said. Very clear. You alone. Then he slid a document toward me. There it was. My name, Naomi Fletcher, was printed neatly in black ink next to figures so large they didn't feel real. $400 million, I let out a short, painful laugh. It didn't feel like joy. It felt like falling. Daniel continued, explaining accounts in America and some in Europe, including several listed in pounds, like £3,200,000. Clara handed me a pen for signatures because my hands were shaking too much to hold it steady. By the time everything was finished, it was nearly evening. I stepped out of the building into the cold air of Brookside City, feeling like I had stepped into someone else's life. I didn't go back to Williford. I couldn't. I found a small hotel in Silver Grove, Delaware, checked in, and collapsed onto the bed. I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, a garbage collector worth $400 million. I should have been happy, but instead, I felt lost, broken, and alone. I had no idea what was waiting for me next, but the truth was coming, and it would change everything. 2 weeks before the lawyer's call and the shocking truth about my inheritance, my life had fallen apart in the most painful way. People imagine that losing a home happens slowly, like cracks growing in a wall, but mine collapsed in one moment, in one ugly, unforgettable evening in Williford, Virginia. It was a Sunday, and I had just finished one of the hardest shifts I'd ever worked. A major festival had taken place in Riverside Hill, and the trash piles had doubled. My arms felt like lead. My boots were soaked. My back ached every time I stood straight. All I wanted was to take a shower, eat something warm, and sleep for 12 hours. When I pushed open the door to my parents' house, the smell of roast chicken filled the air. For one hopeful second, I thought maybe they had saved me a plate. Maybe they felt sorry for always judging me. Maybe they would smile at me just once. But as soon as I stepped inside, my mother, Linda Fletcher, put her fork down and wrinkled her nose like I was something she'd stepped in outside. "You smell like the street," she snapped. "Honestly, Naomi, do you have to come in here wearing that uniform?" I looked down at myself, sweat-stained jacket, dirt on my pants, gloves still hanging from my back pocket. I sighed. I was too tired to fight. "Mom, it's work," I said softly. "I can't change clothes in the truck." My father, Mark, leaned back in his chair, his face red from his third glass of beer. "Work," he scoffed. "You call that work? You pick up trash, Naomi. Trash." I set my backpack near the door and tried to ignore the sting in his words. "I'm paying my bills," I said. "I'm doing my best." "It's not enough," my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The plates rattled. "You embarrass this family. The neighbors talk. People at the church talk. You drag dirt into this house every day." My mother shook her head, pretending to be sad. "We told you to find a respectable job. A real job. A job that doesn't make us look like failures as parents." My chest tightened. "I tried," I said. "No one else hired me. This is honest work." "Not honest enough," my father said coldly. "You're done here. You're leaving tonight." I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh and say he was joking. He didn't. My mother stood up, walked to my room, and began pulling my clothes from my dresser. I heard drawers slamming, hangers clattering, her footsteps angry and heavy. I followed her down the hallway. "Mom, stop. What are you doing?" She tossed a handful of shirts into my old suitcase. "You want to work with trash? Fine. Go stay with your rich uncle. I'm sure he loves taking care of garbage." "That's not fair," I whispered. "Life isn't fair," she said without looking at me. Something in me felt like it was breaking. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like paper tearing. I grabbed the suitcase and walked out of the house. They didn't follow me. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't ask where I would sleep or if I had money. I dragged my belongings down the sidewalk under a dim streetlight, my eyes burning but my jaw set. I refused to cry until I reached the bus stop. Then I cried silently, the way people do when they know no one is coming to comfort them. For the next few nights, I stayed in a cheap room in Lakeview Heights, a small American town 20 minutes from Williford. The motel smelled like stale coffee and old carpets, but at least no one yelled at me there. I went to work every day, pretending my world wasn't falling apart. I even saved my paychecks like always, even though the stack of bills in my backpack looked too small and too fragile to build a future from. Then came the lawyer's call. Then came the truth about Uncle Raymond. Then came the inheritance that would change everything. After the will was finalized and the estate was officially transferred to me, I moved into Uncle Raymond's stone house in Maple Harbor. The first time I walked through the tall black gate as its owner, the security guard, Marcus Green, nodded to me with respectful seriousness. "Welcome home, Miss Fletcher," he said. Home, the word felt strange on my tongue. As I walked up the long driveway, past the trimmed hedges and the quiet fountain, my throat tightened. The house looked enormous up close. Tall windows, gray stone walls, 2 chimneys, and a carved wooden door that looked like it had seen 100 winters. When I stepped inside, the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers washed over me. Every room felt like a secret waiting to be discovered. The kitchen alone was bigger than the entire first floor of my parents' house. It had marble counters, golden handles, and a long island table where sunlight fell in soft stripes. The living room had white sofas, tall lamps, and windows that overlooked Maple Harbor. And the library, oh, the library was my favorite place. Shelves reached all the way to the ceiling. A rolling ladder stood at the edge. The room felt warm, like it remembered every conversation my uncle and I ever shared. Even with all this beauty, I didn't feel rich. I felt strange, like someone had dropped me into a life that wasn't mine yet. So I kept working my old garbage route for a little while. I needed something familiar, something that didn't feel like it would vanish the moment I blinked. One afternoon, after finishing my shift, I returned home still wearing my uniform. I walked into the living room and froze. Through the large window, down by the street, I saw two people standing at the gate. My parents were holding shopping bags, dressed in nicer clothes than usual. They looked relaxed, almost cheerful. My mother pointed toward the house and laughed. "Look at this place," she said loudly to my father. "Your daughter probably cleans the floors here now. Maybe she takes out their trash instead of ours." My father smirked. Maybe she finally found a decent house to mop. Their voices carried easily to the window. Something sharp twisted inside me, but not anger, not sadness. Something calmer, sharper, stronger. I walked to the front door and pushed it open. Marcus turned to me. "Everything all right, Miss Fletcher?" he asked. "Yes," I said softly. "Let me handle this." I stepped out through the gate. My parents both stared at me, confused. "Naomi," my mother said, "what are you doing here?" I smiled, a slow, controlled smile. "You asked if I work as a cleaner here, right?" My father chuckled. "Well, do you?" I let out a breath. "Actually," I said, letting the words sink in, "this is my house." They laughed at first, but the laughter died when they saw my expression. "What do you mean, your house?" my father demanded. So I told them. The will, the estate, the $400 million, the land, the house, the accounts. Everything, all mine. My mother's face turned pale. My father's eyes went wide with hunger. Suddenly, their voices changed. "Naomi, sweetheart," my mother said in a soft, sugary voice. "We were just worried about you. You know we love you, right?" My father stepped closer. "We didn't mean those things. Family should share everything." I stepped back. No, the word was calm, but final. "This is my home," I said. "You made it clear I wasn't welcome in yours. You can't throw me out and come back when you see money." My mother grabbed my arm. "Naomi, don't be childish." I pulled away. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice steady, "please show them out." Marcus moved toward them at once. My father shouted, "Naomi, we are your parents." I met his gaze without shaking. "You were," I said, "but you chose money over me. I just learned the lesson better than you expected." They stood there, stunned, as the gate closed between us. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like trash. I felt like someone who finally belonged somewhere. After the day I shut the gate in my parents' faces, the silence afterward became louder than their voices had ever been. But it did not last long. Within 24 hours, they began trying to reach me in every way they could think of. They called from numbers I didn't recognize. They left long messages, each one more dramatic than the last. They even walked back to the gate in the evenings, asking Marcus, the guard, to tell our daughter we're sorry, as if the word sorry could erase the years of insults and the night they threw me out like I didn't matter. I refused to answer. I refused to open the door. I refused to explain myself again. Some people might say I was cruel, but I don't believe cruelty is standing up for yourself. Cruelty is telling your own child that she's worthless until she suddenly becomes valuable because of money. Cruelty is pretending love when you see dollar signs. That was what they did. And that was what I could not forgive. Inside the stone house in Maple Harbor, I began building a new life. One that felt too big for me at first, like wearing a coat a few sizes larger. The echoes in the halls seemed to follow me, and some nights I felt like a ghost wandering a life I didn't earn. But then I remembered who had chosen me. My uncle. And I reminded myself that becoming rich overnight didn't erase the years I spent working hard and surviving on my own. The first person I hired was a financial advisor named Lucas Reed. Lucas was originally from Brighton, a coastal city in Europe, but he had lived in America for over a decade. He had calm eyes, dark hair always neatly combed, and a voice that made complicated money talk sound almost friendly. He explained everything: the accounts in America, the houses, the land, the investments, and even the bank accounts in pounds that I had never known existed. One morning, Lucas looked over a stack of documents and said, "Naomi, you could live 10 lives and still not spend all of this. What do you want to do with it?" I didn't answer right away. I sat there at my uncle's long wooden table, looking out the tall window. I remembered every alley in Riverside Hill, every overflowing bin, every tired face that smiled at me as I hauled their trash away. I remembered the years when a $20 bill felt like a miracle. So I made choices that felt right, choices my uncle would have respected. I created the Naomi Fletcher Fund, giving $10 million toward helping workers in low-paid jobs: garbage collectors, cleaners, caretakers, and kitchen staff. People who kept America running, but were treated like shadows. The fund paid for classes, housing support, medical bills, and transportation. I donated $500,000 to help finish a community center in Williford, not because of my parents, but because the children there deserved more than I ever had. When things settled down, I took a week-long trip to Europe, staying in a small guest house in a quiet coastal town. I paid in pounds, walked along narrow stone streets, and listened to the sea. For the first time in a long time, I felt the world was much bigger than my past. But no matter where I went, my heart always pulled me back to Maple Harbor, the home that once felt impossible, the home my uncle trusted me with. On quiet nights, I sit in the library with a cup of warm tea and a soft lamp glowing beside me. I look at the shelves and remember sitting here with my uncle when I was 19. I remember him saying, "Naomi, the world will try to measure you by money. Don't let it. But if the day ever comes when you have more than you need, I hope you use it to remember who you were before it." I touch the wall beside me and whisper, "I remember. I remember the garbage truck, the exhaustion, the insults, the cold nights when I thought my life was slipping away. And I remember the day the gate closed behind my parents, not out of hatred, but out of self-respect. Now the house is mine, the wealth is mine, and the name on the front door, Naomi Fletcher, is mine alone. And no matter how many times my parents come back asking for forgiveness or a share, I keep the gate shut because this time I choose myself."